for fear of repeating something that everybody knows 1,000,001 times, I think it's valuable in the month of Elul to go back to an old phrase. When I say old phrase, I just mean that it's used a lot. And it's supposed to describe for us what the month of Elul is all about. However, like anything else in Torah, if you just gloss over something, you don't really get the value of it. Whereas if you pause and you reflect and you investigate a little bit further, so you get to really appreciate what the concept is all about. So we're told that Elul is a Rosh Teves. It is a mnemonic, it's an acronym for 4 words. Ani, Ledoidi, V'doidi li. Which basically is supposed to represent how we relate to Hashem. Ani, I. Ledoidi, I reach out towards Hashem. And I take an initiative in order to connect to Hashem. V'doidi li, and then Hashem will reply to my efforts. So basically, what that describes for us is what we call in the language of Hasidus, Isarusa de Lesata, which is followed by an Isarusa de Le'ela. So Isarusa de Lesato basically means an awakening from below. That means our initiative, our inspiration. And when we take that initiative, then we get in return Isarusa de Le'ela, an awakening from above, which means that Hashem, so to speak, wakes up. I mean, it's a very difficult expression to use with regards to Hashem, that Hashem wakes up, because that almost seems to imply that Hashem is, God forbid, not awake. So, Isarusa de Lesato, Isarusa de Le'ela. Now, these two realities could happen in one way, or they could happen in the other way. Here we're describing the one way. Isarusa de Lesato, we make the first step. We initiate some kind of a movement towards Hashem. And then, as a result, Isarusa de Le'ela, Hashem, so to speak, arouses and awakens himself in order to reply to us. But it's possible that it could work the other way too. Isarusa de Le'ela, that Hashem makes the first step. Hashem initiates some kind of contact. And then as a result of that, we're inspired. So Isarusa de Lesato, we wake up and we want to connect to Hashem. So this time of the year, the focus is on the first process. Isarusa de Lesato, first we have to make the move. And we need to understand and appreciate what's the difference between the two. In other words, what happens to us spiritually when we initiate connection to Hashem? And what happens to us spiritually when Hashem initiates connection with us? Now, like anything else in life, it's unusual, if not impossible, to find that one particular format is perfect. Usually what you find is things have advantages and disadvantages. And it's no different in this case. There is an advantage to us taking initiative, but it has a disadvantage. There's an advantage to Hashem taking initiative, but it has a disadvantage. So we need to appreciate and understand what the two are. So, if something is initiated by humans, anything at all, whatever it is, any project, any invention, any ideology, anything that is initiated by humans, you have to expect that human beings, by our very nature, are finite. So whatever we're going to innovate will have its limits. It could be a limit of time. So if you invent something, maybe it's relevant now. And in 5 years' time, it's completely irrelevant, as we often see with technologies, right? When a technology first comes out, it's like amazing, and everybody's like, what? And then it comes to times where the technology becomes obsolete. Or, if it's not time, then it's power. So if, for example, a human being initiates a particular process, it can only have as much energy as a human being is capable of investing, so it's going to run out of steam at some point. Like inspiration, right? Sometimes when we try to inspire ourselves, we can only push ourselves a certain amount, and then we kind of run out of steam. That's the disadvantage of a human initiative. Whereas, on the other hand, if something is Hashem's initiative, he doesn't have these problems. Hashem's not bound by the limits of time or energy or anything. So if Hashem introduces something into the mix, then we know that there's no force in the world that can interfere with it. So what would you prefer? Would you prefer to do something that you initiate, which you know is going to run into problems, because that's the nature of people? Something that I initiate at one point in my life, perhaps I'm not able to sustain at a different point in my life. Or would you prefer that Hashem does all the work? So Hashem kind of explodes onto the scene, and he does, and he introduces something, and then you know that there's nothing in the world that could stop it happening. So you'd be tempted to say, I prefer the second option, because then at least I know that it's got power and it's sustainable and nothing can derail it, because it's Hashem's initiative. That brings us then to the second point. The second point is, let's leave Hashem out of it for a second just to illustrate this. What does a person prefer in life? Do you prefer to have everything done for you? Or do you prefer to achieve things of your own accord? Now, it's quite tempting to have things done for us. It is tempting. That's why people, for example, like to fly first class. Everything's done for me. Somebody carries your suitcases. They let you sleep on the plane. They wine and dine you. That's why people like to go to fancy hotels. I'm going to go. I just want to relax. That's why people eat out. Not necessarily because the food is better, by the way. Sometimes it is. Sometimes just, I like to be served. Somebody else should be worried about how the food gets to my plate. It's nice, but it's not a nice way to live. You know, there are places where people live and they actually do have somebody provide all of their food every day, cleans their room every day, does things for them. Unfortunately, people are in those places because they cannot look after themselves. A human being, part of the experience of being human and part of the richness of being human is achievement. So in the language of the Zohar, we call it nama de chisufa, the bread of shame. When something's handed to you on a platter, there's a certain element of shame that goes with it. Well, I'm a nebuch, I have to get a handout. I'd much rather do my own thing. Even if I'm not the wealthiest person on earth, it's okay. As long as I am able to pay my bills, I'm able to look after myself and have a certain dignity. So it's interesting that sometimes you could have more but feel less dignified, and other times you could have less and feel more of a mensch. So the disadvantage of Isarusa de La'ela, when Hashem takes the first step and Hashem chooses to inspire us and Hashem does something which is completely supernatural for us, the disadvantage is, yes, of course, it's Hashem, so it's going to have no limitations. The disadvantage is I feel like I'm the recipient of a handout. Okay, so God is great, but I feel like a schlepper. Whereas the advantage of Isarusa de la Sata, when the initiative comes from me, maybe it's not so spectacular, maybe it's not so exciting, but it's me. I've done it. I've achieved something. Pesach is the time of the year that is called Doidi Li Va'ani Loi. In other words, if you go back to the Pesach story, you'll see that what happened to the Pesach story is Hashem did not wait for us to make any initiative. We didn't reach out to Hashem and say, okay, listen, we are willing to do X and Y if you'll take us out of Egypt. Basically, Hashem looked down and he saw that if we were going to stay in Egypt any longer, we were going to completely assimilate and it would be the end of us. So it was a rescue mission. That's basically what it was. It was a rescue mission. Hashem came swooping in, set out a whole bunch of plagues, wiped out the Egyptians, and dragged us out. And we have forever felt indebted to Hashem, as we said, the Pesach Seder. If Hashem had not taken our forefathers out, we would still be slaves in Egypt. But we didn't at that point own the experience. That means to say that everything was handed to us, and because we hadn't worked to achieve it, there was always a little bit of resentment, which might explain psychologically why the Jewish people complained a lot, because when people are spoiled and they don't necessarily appreciate what they have, so sometimes that's when they behave in an inappropriate fashion. This time of the year, as we come through Elul and we move to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, there are no major top-heavy interventions from Hashem. He doesn't kind of splurge in our face and say, here I am, be awakened. Some people are into that. Some people believe that that's the ultimate, that one day God is going to come along and he's going to reveal himself, and then we're all just going to fall into place. But as far as Judaism is concerned, that's actually not the ultimate. The ultimate is that we work through our own processes, and over the course of this period of time, Elul, going through the early part of Tishrei, and in fact the whole of Tishrei, but specifically the early part of Tishrei. So this is a time where we say, look, Hashem, I cannot necessarily replicate all of the beautiful perfection that you could bring to this world. I'm not able to. I'm a person. So I have my limits. I have my limits of energy, limits of understanding, limits of time, limits of capacity to sustain something. But what I can say for sure, absolutely, without a question, is that whatever I am going to do, I'm going to do it with my all. It will be me. It will be my investment. I won't just be hanging on to your coattails. And that's really the beauty of this time of the year. So when people look at the time of the year, Elul and Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, this period of the year, and they think that there's some kind of an expectation at this time of the year that we should be getting 10 out of 10, and we should be reaching the highest levels of inspiration, that's not necessarily the case. But what is the case, 100%, is that each of us should do something that we can say is ours. Like, I really worked at this. It wasn't easy for me, and I really worked hard at it, and that's Ani Doidi. That's how we reach out to Hashem, for which Hashem promises us, Doidili, that He will respond in kind. And when Hashem responds, He doesn't necessarily respond to scale. He responds at His level, which is way, way beyond anything that we could have imagined. So please God, during the course of this period of time, we take those steps, and we feel ownership of our own Judaism, and please God, Hashem responds with the most incredible brachos for us.